Good afternoon, everyone. It's just slightly after 4, and we're waiting for everybody who's online to be included into the meeting. So we'll just give it another minute and then we'll get started. Okay, well, I think we have a fair number of people who have joined us here today. So thank you very much for joining us on this gorgeous Thursday afternoon in May for this public information session on the Kashwakamak Lake Dam Environmental Assessment Project. My name is Sally McIntyre. I'm the General Manager at Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. And we have a number of people on with us here today, both from ourselves at MVCA as well as our consultant partners on this, which is Aegis. I'll turn it over shortly to our Director of Engineering, Euro Kunderlich, and the project manager from Aegis, Lisa Marshall. I did have a few introductory words I just wanted to share with you. So as I mentioned, this is the first public information center, but we've been working on this project for well over a year now, and we established a working group to work with us on this, and we met with them earlier in this year. We will be going through the history of the project and the methods, the approach that was taken and the analysis that where we are to date. I just want to emphasize to everybody that no decisions have taken at this point in time. We have a study, we have some results, we have findings, and our objective today is to present those to you and to hear back from you, and so that you can provide opportunity to let us know if we've overlooked anything, if there's additional information we should be considering, etc. Some of the logistics for the meeting today. It's a fairly lengthy presentation, so we will be pausing periodically amongst the slides to give people the opportunity to ask clarification questions. We don't necessarily need you to hold all your questions to the end. If there's something you want clarification on, please, during those pauses, let us know and we'll help to answer those questions. If you have major questions that will require some discussion, if we could hold those to the end, that would be appreciated. Another thing is that during those pauses, if you want to ask a question, you can use two functions. Either you can raise your hand. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, there are two tools at the bottom of your screen. One is titled React. And if you click on the React button, you should see amongst the options there something raise hand. And to the left of that is a chat function. So if you're not comfortable addressing the group, then you can always go into the chat line and put in your question there. And the team will be monitoring questions in the chat. And when we have those pauses, they'll answer your question as best they can. If you have any technical issues, if you could please use the chat function, and our colleague Kelly will be monitoring the chat and will help navigate that with you to hopefully allow for your full participation. We will be posting both the slides that you're going to see as well as this presentation online afterwards. So if you know of friends, colleagues, etc., who weren't able to attend today but are interested in the project, it will be posted on our website, and they'll be able to access that probably tomorrow morning. And then lastly, I just wanted to let you know that we are on the lands of several First Nations. We are charged by the Crown with the management of natural hazards and resources within the watersheds of the Mississippi and the Carp and portions of the Ottawa River. And that jurisdiction includes land subject to treaties with Indigenous peoples, including Treaty 27, the Williams Treaty, and the Crawford Purchases of 1783. Our jurisdiction is also within the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care of and teachings about our earth and our relations. As we move forward on this path of reconciliation, may we learn and once again honor those teachings and bring them into the work that we do here at MVCA and here today. So thank you and miigwech. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague, the Director of Engineering, Euro Kandelik.
Okay, well, thank you, Sally. So my name is Euro Kandelik, and Sally said I'm Director of Engineering at MVCA, and I'm also the project manager for the Kashwakamak Lake Dam project on MVCA side. And today I have with me members of my team that have been helping me with this project. So with us is Jennifer North. She's a water resources technologist at MVCA. Then Alana Perez, who is a water resources engineer, and also Jane Cho, who is EIT. And with that, I will pass it on to our consultant, Lisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So our team from EGIS, and just to put a side note, some of you may have received previous communication from me was formerly Macintosh Perry, but we are the same. We are now just going by the name of EGIS. So today my team with me is Mustafa Salah. He's our senior water resources engineer, and also Monica Orwin, who is our EIT that is working on this assignment with it. And as Euro alluded to, I'm Lisa Marshall. I am the project manager for this file and leading the environmental assessment for this project. So with not further ado, I will jump into the presentation. I'm just going to as well turn off my camera just to make sure that we have proper communication. And as Sally indicated, I will stop throughout the presentation to allow for some breaks and for some questioning at that point in time. So the purpose of this Public Information Center is to present the information about the Kashwakamak Lake Dam environmental assessment process and to provide opportunities for interested parties and persons to review and comment on the process. So a couple categories that we'll be looking at throughout and that we are able to provide comments on is the proposed study area that we're looking at, the understanding of the Conservation Ontario class environmental assessment process in relation to the remedial and flood erosion control. It allows an opportunity to review and comment on the inventories that we've undertaken of existing conditions within the study area, as well as looking at the proposed alternative solutions that we've identified, the evaluation process, and then the recommended preferred alternative solution at this time. As Sally alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, no firm decisions have been made, so that's why we've kept that keyword in there as it's recommended at this time, and we're looking for further consultation this evening with respect to it. So MVCA's jurisdiction covers the watershed of Mississippi River in Eastern Ontario. The Mississippi River system is a complex network and comprised of several rivers, streams, rapids, and over 250 lakes. The river is a managed system with an entire watershed area of 3,765 kilometers square. So quite extensive, as you can see from the mapping on the right-hand side here. In order to manage the system, several dams and weirs are located along the Mississippi River. They help and aid in mitigating any drought and flooding through the regulation of flows and managing water levels. But these systems also, or I should say these dams and weirs, also play a big part in maintaining water levels for purposes such as recreational throughout the watershed. So it's quite a big system and a number of working functions throughout it. The Kashwak Lake Dam is located at the upper reach. As you can see from the diagram on the right again, it's in the upper reach of the watershed and it's at the very downstream end of the Kashwak Lake. The dam itself has a catchment area of 415 kilometers squared, and it's located in the township of North Frontenac. It's one of several reservoirs lakes, a reservoir lake that serve as critical storage function. Again, as we stated above, its main functions is to help mitigate the flooding and droughts, but also is essential to stabilizing those water levels within the lake itself, to ensure that it services, local residents and cottages from a recreational activities or tourism's perspective. The Kashwakamak Lake is located off Road 506. The site is accessed through Guntinson Road and through a private access road, which you can see is at the far end here. It's blocked off through a gate, and it's a small access road, sort of a one-way lane into the site, that allows for the MVCA to operate and maintain the dam and get in to access the site. Kashwakamak Dam has quite an extensive history. It was designed and constructed as a lumber dam in 1860, which makes it over 100 years old at this point in time. It was reconstructed in 1911 by private interest, and minor repairs were completed throughout 1911 to 1988. MVCA took over ownership of the dam in 1991. Since taking ownership, MVCA has undertaken various repairs between 1995 and 2016 to help reduce seepage and improve dam safety. However, in 2022, the dam safety review was undertaken and identified that the structure is in a deteriorated state and was given a rating of poor to fair condition. Based on this assessment, MVCA looked at updating their 10-year capital plan, which was updated to allow for the completion of this environmental assessment and looking at either dam renewal or replacement to be undertaken. So through the Conservation Ontario Class Environmental Assessment, it's a set out process that we follow. So there's 2 stages at the beginning that we look at. Stage 1 is the project initiation. So that's where we prepare a problem statement and complete any baseline inventories of the environment, to help with the assessment that is completed in stage 2. This is that first stage is where we sent out our first notice of intent, to inform the public that this project was being initiated, and as well as established our community liaison committee to help further provide their consultation and reviewing of the material prepared throughout the EA process. In stage 2, we identified and evaluated the alternative solutions. So you'll see later in the presentation, we've come up with 5 at this time, and go through and look at the potential impacts of each of these alternatives and if they can be mitigated. Through this, at that point, where we're at right now is we go out and do some further consultation. So we hosted our CLC meeting. We engage with public agencies, stakeholders, First Nations, and general public. And then this evening, we're hosting our Public Information Center to do a broader base consultation, to help assess the evaluations and make sure that we are looking at all the preferred criteria and considerations to ensure we select the preferred solution. Following this meeting, we will take all the input that we receive, all the responses and comments, and take it into assessment, into our evaluation to help select the preferred solution. Following that, we will conduct a detailed analysis on the environmental impacts of that alternative. From that, we look at, can the impacts be avoided, mitigated, or compensated? So there's 3 levels here that we look at. If it's yes, we feel that we can, avoid, mitigate, or compensate, then we move into preparing a project plan, and ensure that all concerns are addressed. This plan will get issued. For notice of filing of interest to persons and parties so they can provide comments as we move forward. And if all of those comments and concerns are addressed, we move forward to providing the notice of project and avoid approval and to proceed to construction. If we're uncertain if we can avoid and mitigate any of those concerns, then we have to go one step further and go into a more detailed report, which is an environmental study report, and determine if impacts are impacts deemed acceptable at that point in time. Then we can conclude it and publish a notice of filing. if all is said and done, we do not feel that we can avoid any or mitigate or compensate, then we have to look at an individual environmental assessment or reassess the program options. And then there's another point of consultation, and we do that as we move forward. I'm going to pause there, and I also noticed that a question came up on the chat. Could you highlight any information that is new relative to what was presented at the CLC meeting? Okay, yeah, I will identify that as we move forward. Alan. So I'll pause here. Is there anything that, any questions that anybody has at this point in time, or any comments or concerns? No, nothing at this time. Okay, I will keep moving ahead. So at the onset of the environmental assessment process, a problem statement was established. Throughout the course of the assignment, all decision-making and evaluation processes are related back to this statement to ensure compliance. It's generally usually a formal statement that is going to be included. I think it's included on the website, and it'll be included in our project file report. But for purposes of this meeting, we've sort of broken it down into sections to make it a bit more feasible. So the first, we identify the problem. The problem for this is the existing Kashwak Lake Dam is well beyond its design life and is at risk for potential failure if allowed to continue to deteriorate. The 2022 dam safety review also identified significant deterioration, especially of the overflow weir. So now that we defined the problem, we have to identify what we are trying to accomplish. So through this statement, a decision needs to be made on whether to decommission, repair, or replace the dam. And in order to accomplish this, we need to select the preferred alternative must consider several constraints and opportunities, such as public safety, ravine processes and flooding, climate change, cultural heritage, indigenous rights, the natural habitat, and public use and aesthetics. And then the very last part of the statement is the main objective of the study is to ensure the preferred alternative addresses the problem while balancing the study area constraints and opportunities in order to best meet the needs of the various stakeholder groups and interested parties. So if we put that statement all together, like I said at the beginning, we can constantly refer back to the statement to make sure that we've looked at all the constraints and opportunities, that we've properly assessed them, and that we can properly mitigate and identify any problems moving forward, and that the preferred alternative is selected at the end of this assignment. A consultation plan was established at the onset of the assignment to seek input from agency stakeholders and the public. A contact list was established, and as you can see from the diagram on the right here, so it was the contact list was made up of people, First Nations, as well as local residents, general public, and the Kashwakamak Lake Association. There was also stakeholders, private property owners, businesses, and utilities, the Township of North Frontenac. We also had external agencies, federal and provincial, are included on the list, as well as our community liaison committee members are included on that list. So it's an extensive list that received communication throughout the entire length of the project. At this time, we have consultation that has been completed. So on May 25th, the notice of intent was circulated to the people identified on the contact list. Oh, hang on, is it possible to increase your volume? Is everybody having issues hearing me? I'll try and speak louder. Sorry. And through that initial consultation, we also contacted 14 First Nations through the notice of intent. On August 24th, an expression of interest was sent out to the township, as well as the Kashwakamak Lake Association, First Nation, and local residents to join the Committee of Liaisons. Our first meeting with the CLC committee was held on February 26th. And then we went into some of our investigations that were completed, and one of them being the marine archaeological assessment. So in that, we sent out an invitation to First Nations to participate on August 30th. and the field investigation was completed on September 11th. During that time, representatives attended from Algonquin of Pigwakangan First Nations and Algonquin of Ontario attended the site visit for that marine archaeological assessment. We'll discuss these studies a bit further as we move forward as well. On May 2nd, the notice of public information was also shared with government agencies, stakeholders, First Nations, interested parties, as well as the public, and posted on MVCA's website and social media. The notice was also circulated in the North Frontenac News on May 9th and 16th. A secondary field investigation was completed for a stage 2 archaeological. Again, we consulted and sent out an invitation, was extended to First Nations to participate in the assessment on April 18th. The field work for this was completed on May 2nd. And again, representatives attended from Alderville First Nation and Algonquin Pickwickan was First Nation also attended. So quite a bit of consultation has been done throughout. Notices, like we've indicated, notice of intent and notice of PIC are the general notices that have been sent out, but there's been some behind the scenes communication as well with various agencies, First Nations, and the public that has happened to date. Through our initial consultation, we have received the following general comments. So generally at this time, the main concern or main request, I should say, has been to stay involved in the study and be able to provide input. There's been a number of comments pertaining to the dam control and maintaining water levels for both safety and recreational tourism purposes. It's been noted that hundreds of people who live around the lake rely on the water levels and the safety of the operation of it. And also we have one request, or one was noted, if the dam, it's been considered to turn into a power supply to become a revenue source. The main concerns we received, as indicated, is changes in water level, as well as the ability of the proposed alternative to continue to mitigate flood and drought risks. When will construction occur and how it will impact the water levels during that period of time? And then also another comment we received or concern was a potential impacts to the dam on the Manamans, which we will discuss a bit further, but it's rice crops that are located down in the Mississippi watershed, further down from the dam. I'm going to pause again at this time to see if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns. My volume is much better, thank you. I'll try and talk better. Nothing. I can know if Euro and others from Mississippi, if anybody does see hands go up, I don't know if it goes onto the screen, but I don't see anything at this time. So I will keep moving along.
We do have one hand there.
Perfect.
Alan has a question.
Go ahead, Alan. Oh, you're on mute, I think, Alan, still. I don't know if I'm unable to unmute you. Alan, you're still on mute, I think.
Mute.
There you go.
Am I okay?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Something I should have raised at the CLC meeting, but I forgot at the end there, is questions that have come up last summer actually about how the project is going to be funded and whether the cost of the improvement will have any impact on our municipality, North Frontenac, obviously, and presumably the ones downstream, in terms of any additional pressure on their budgets. And we didn't get around to talking about that. So maybe you could squeeze that in sometime in your presentation.
Do you want to address that now?
Sure. I'm just turning on my video here, camera. So MBCA was successful securing both federal and provincial funding for this project, and we have been granted a federal funding through the DMAF program, which stands for Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Program, which is run by Infrastructure Canada. And also we have been successful securing grant from the provincial BECI program, or Water Erosion and Infrastructure program. So yes, we have been successful, receiving funding for the project. Sally, I don't know if you want to add anything on the impacts on the levy and
Yeah, certainly. So it would be nice if the province and the federal government funded us entirely for the project, but that's not going to be the case. But I think the federal funding is up to 40%, and of the balance, the province will support up to 50%. So the difference is going to be borne by Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. It is eligible for what's now called Category 1 funding, which means all the member municipalities within our jurisdiction are going to contribute towards the reconstruction or rehabilitation of this dam to some level. The degree of participation, or pardon me, contribution from each municipality is dictated by a formula that basically says, depending on the assessment value within that municipality, within our watershed, they pay that proportion amount. So what it means is, in this instance, that the City of Ottawa is a major contributor, will be a major contributor to this capital project. Yes, North Frontenac will be contributing, but to a lesser amount.
Thank you. Do you have at this stage any sense of the total cost of the project? The numbers that would...
So the total cost has been estimated to be approximately $6 million.
6 million.
Yes.
I suppose in today's world, that's cheap compared to so many other things.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I shall lower my hand.
Is there any other questions at this time? No? Oh, one more. Gary? I think you're still on mute.
Okay.
There you
So
go.
I'm the mayor. I'm the mayor of North Frontenac. So that financial question is extremely important to us and to our ratepayers. We already have a funding agreement with the MVCA. How much roughly can we expect this to increase?
So sorry, there we go. So the funding agreement is for Category 3 programs. So it does not affect Category 3 programming whatsoever. This is a Category 1, meaning it's a mandatory program that Conservation Authority must deliver on. So it goes on the main levy, which is established annually. And so it has no impact other than what your council has already accepted when we put forward our 2024 budget for this year, both the operating budget and the capital budget. We have been increasing over the past few years our capital levy to all the municipalities to help pay for the rehabilitation of not just this dam, but there are several dams throughout the system that are well in excess of their end of life or their life cycle. So we are looking at, several years in going forward into the future of having to put investment into this infrastructure. So our 10-year capital plan currently allows for roughly $10 to $11 million of investment in capital renewal over the next 10 years.
Thank you.
Any others? Nope. Okay, I will continue on then. So as part of stage 1 of the EA, as I indicated, we do a number of inventory and studies throughout. The first one we undertake it was a natural heritage assessment. We went out, our natural science team went out and looked at the existing conditions to inventory it and document the study for any natural features. This environmental assessment of the existing conditions then allows us to do an environmental impact assessment. So identification of potential environmental impacts and provides mitigation measure recommendations that are appropriate to the site feature and landscape, and allows us to look at each of the alternative and properly assess them in the selection of the preferred alternative. We also, as I alluded to previously through the consultation, we undertook an archaeological and a cultural heritage assessment. The archaeological was twofold. It was a land and a marine archaeological assessment to determine if the site has any archaeological potential, as both, for the land as well as for the water. So the team went out. There was an archaeological team that we had that went out, and they snorkeled throughout a certain area in the water course up and upstream and downstream of the dam, looking for any artifacts. So that was done as well, which was quite interesting and fascinating to see them do that. And then the other one we do is the cultural heritage evaluation, as the structure is over 100 years old. So to determine if the dam retains any cultural heritage value or interest under the Ontario Heritage Act. Assessment was done as to see if there was any heritage value. These assessments I'll outline a bit further as we move forward too in the findings of them. The other one was a hydraulic assessment undertaken to evaluate the existing conditions and proposed alternative solutions to determine impacts on the surface water flows, elevations, and velocities. So quite a number of studies were done as part of this assignment. So through the next couple of slides that I'll just sort of highlight the natural environment investigations and a couple of the findings that we saw when we were out on site, or our natural science team, I should say, saw when they were out on site. So Kashwakamak Lake is identified as having a cool and warm thermal water regime. The lake and Mississippi River provides permanent fish habitat and suitable spawning habitat, both upstream and downstream. As you can see on the side picture, we've noted where there's some sensitive fish habitat that was identified immediately downstream of the structure, and then further down in the Mississippi River as well as it was over by the Saddle Dam. Through consultation with MBCA and other governing agencies, as well as our fieldwork observations, significant fish habitat was identified, like I said, immediately downstream. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there, of downstream in the form of spot fish and bait fish spawning. The lake was also identified as having a large population of walleye, as well as white sucker, bass, northern pike, bait fish, and non-sport fish species. We also assessed wetlands throughout the study area. Within our study area, there was no wetlands identified. However, there are several small wetlands surrounding the perimeter of the lake, as well as downstream. It was noted that Mud Lake Provincial Significant Wetland is located, which provides areas for overwintering for various species, including turtles, such as blending turtles. We've also identified that downstream, approximately 7 kilometers downstream, as I alluded to earlier, the Manaman is located there, which is a wild rice crop field. The Manaman is an aquatic annual species of grass and has a cultural significance to Ardok Algonquin First Nation, as well as Alderville First Nation, and potentially other First Nations have interest in these white rice fields as well. And the importance of them is that the dam itself and various dams throughout the watershed, if there's any changes in water levels at certain periods of times, it can definitely have impacts on the rice fields themselves and their production. The study area consists mainly of a mixed forested, including species of such of eastern hemlock, eastern white cedar, American elm, American beech, white pine, red oak, and paper birch. Background data search also concluded that through the Natural Heritage Information Center, that the forest is identified as being prevalent, but it wasn't identified as having any significance. During our natural heritage field investigation, we also noted that there was no invasive or noxious plant species observed, nor were there any butternut or black ash trees observed within the study area. Now, that doesn't mean they don't exist out there. It was just during our study, we did not identify any of these species when we were out doing our field work. There's also noted that there's a significant wild habitat in the form of bat maternity colonies, birds, turtle wintering areas, species at risk concerns, and wild wildlife species, as well as other turtles, lizards, and nesting habitat within the study area. Most of the forested provides suitable habitat for many different species of wildlife, and are known to habitat in the mid canopy layer of the mixed forest, as well as the opened woodlands and along the edges of the embankments. We also have a number of rock structures, as the bedrock is quite prevalent in this area. So sort of rock outcrop areas where snakes and lizards can also habitate. So from a species at risk perspective, given the presence of the forest, there's a highly quality bat maternity roosting trees within the study area, which can have potential for little brown myotis, northern myotis, and tricolor pats that may occur in their active breeding season, which is between April and September 30th. The forest in the area as well provides habitat and suitable breeding habitat for various birds of species at risk or species at concern, including red-headed woodpecker, eastern whippoorwill willow, and wood thrush. Not good at pronunciation. That may occur. So in this, you can then just identify the study area that we looked at. When our natural science team went out, they identified these areas. And as the majority of it surrounding the structure is considered to be potential suitable habitat for sarsbat nesting area that you can see by the hatched area in the red color. And then the Natural Heritage Information Center all identified the woodland being in that area as well. That provides significant areas for habitat and breeding grounds. From a herpetile perspective, the potential area is suitable for nesting and overwintering habitat, as I identified for Blanding's turtles, in midland painting turtles and snapping turtles, may also occur in the study area. During our site investigation, we did identify closer to where the saddle dam is, we did identify a snapping turtle that was there. So there was one observed, as well as there was a turtle nest located closer to the dam structure, but it wasn't identified. It wasn't known of what species the turtle was per se. Given the location, the rock structure features in and around the edge of the lake. There, like I indicated, in the rocks, there's potential for snakes, so the milk snake, and then as well as the 5-lined sink lizard. I'll pause there if there's any other questions before I move on. No? So the shoreline of Kashwakamak Lake Dam consists of approximately 577 residents and seasonal cottagers and several marines and resorts. As previously noted, the dam itself plays a significant role in maintaining the water levels in this area. We recognize that it's used, the lake itself is maintained for boating and fishing. There's camping, as also ensuring the production and continuation of the rice fields downstream. So it's used for quite a number of features. We recognize that there is quite a bit of residents and that the lake levels being maintained is quite important. The landscape is dominated by forest as well as lakes and wetlands, and for the most part is largely undeveloped. There are a few private properties, as you can see here. This is the location of our dam. And flows downstream the Mississippi River. And then as I refer to, there's a saddle dam, which we will get to a bit further, that runs along the shoreline as well. So through the process, we also undertook a stage 1 archaeological assessment, which was done through a desktop review of available information and databases, and a preliminary site walk was completed by our subconsultant. It was determined through that study that the site exhibited some archaeological potential. So they went back out and completed a stage 2 assessment, which consisted of excavating, as you can see from the numbers on the side on the diagram, excavating a bunch of test pits and searching for some archaeological artifacts. As noted early, notification was sent out to various First Nations to see if they're interested in participating in the field investigations. And for this, 2 representatives attended the stage 2 archaeological assessment. It was Alderville First Nation and Algonquin of Pickwagan sent monitors to be on site during the investigation. During the investigation, it was noted there was a small indigenous site located along the water's edge. It was more in an area of potential laydown for staging areas. It was more towards the south, we'll call it southeast of the structure or east of the structure. And it was a small area that was found a few artifacts were located. Due to that, we are currently talking with our subconsultant in MVCA to determine if a stage 3 archaeological assessment is required to alleviating restrictions during construction. As I indicated, it would be mainly from a staging area perspective, as most of the work is going to be, if the preferred alternative is replacement, is towards the dam itself. But that's still under review. A marine archaeological, so a stage 1 and stage 2 was done concurrently on September 11th. And as I alluded to, they went out and snorkeled the area upstream and down. During their investigation, no archaeological findings were unearthed in the water, and the site was cleared from any archaeological perspective, from a marine perspective. Cultural heritage, due to the age of the structure being over 100 years old, a cultural evaluation report was prepared to determine if it retained any cultural value, any heritage value or interest. It was determined it did not. Therefore, no further studies or investigations was required to be done on the structure. We also undertook exploration of subsurface conditions. The investigation was done in September 18th and to the 25th. A drill rig was brought on site, and 4 test pits, or boreholes, I should say, were advanced to a depth of approximately 9 meters below existing ground. Bedrock was observed at the ground surface, as you know, the majority, and as we've seen in the other photos, it is pretty prevalent at the surface, the rock. And the core itself bedrock was identified all through the core, right down to the bottom of the hole. When analyzed, the bedrock, our geotech team identified it as carbonate meta-sedimentary bedrock, and it showed signs of slightly weathered and fractured with moderately close and horizontal diagonal joints, was the defined or the proper terminology of it, of the type of bedrock that is currently out on site. Through that, our geotechnical group provided some recommendations to be considered as we move forward. If the dam were to be replaced, it's recommended, due to the fractures in the type of bedrock, that excavation for the dam be done on extended down to sound bedrock, which is anticipated to be encountered quite shallow, as the bedrock is near surface or at ground surface. So not a lot of excavation expected, but if it is, we need to make sure that it's excavated down to sound bedrock prior to constructing, if it is constructing a new dam. As well as that, appropriate dewatering measures are put in place, such as a cofferdam or sheet piling, to be used to effectively control the water levels during construction, so that residents in the lake isn't impacted during, as well as to allow for the construction of the dam itself. So the existing dam, we'll get into a bit of it now and just sort of define what's out there. The main dam consists of a north and south abutment. It's a bit hard to see from this picture, but on the next slide, I'll show a bit better one, but the abutments run along the sides of each of the dam. There's 3 concrete piers that we have. So 1, 2, 3 that are situated, and these piers form the 2 sluice gates, and then the broad crested weir that extends across this part of the river. Based on the previous dam inspections that were done in 2016 and the dam safety inspection report in 2020, there was a number of deficiencies noted through that report. Dam abutments have inadequate freeboard. Freeboard provides a safety factor to allow for some fluctuation in water elevation that can occurs as a result of wind and wave action. So it wouldn't allow it to prevent overtopping of the structure. So at this time, it was noted that there is inadequate freeboard, probably most likely due to the age of the structure. The overflow weir and abutments do not satisfy the requirements for ice loading from the lake. The structure itself, from a concrete perspective, the methods used were outdated, and materials used were originally constructed the dam that may pose significant challenges if it was tried to be rehabbed. All concrete structures were noted to be in a state of deterioration and are rated as being in poor to fair condition. Due to the age of the dam, as we alluded to, is over 100 years old. It was also designed to outdated hazard potential classification and inflow design flood. So just to provide a bit of context, what that means is HPC is established by the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. The HPC is developed system to evaluate the potential hazard caused by uncontrolled release of the reservoir due to failure of the dam structure or the impertinences. The HPC is determined by assessing the greater incremental loss that could occur in the event of the dam failure and the impact on 4 categories. So the 4 categories they look at when trying to determine the HPC are the life safety, property losses, environmental losses, as well as cultural and built heritage losses. So through that, we do an assessment, and then ratings are being provided for each of those, whether it's low, moderate, high, or very high, to help in selecting that HPC, which then further helps with the design of the bridge, or not the bridge, the dam. IDF is also the inflow design flood, which is determined based on the HPC rating. So the other part of this structure that we're alluded to is the concrete saddle dam. The concrete saddle dam runs adjacent, sorry, I keep pointing the wrong street, runs adjacent to the access road of the site. The dam prevents spillage of the lake, however, it has inadequate freeboard at this time as well. Failure of the saddle dam would result in overtopping of the access road, which would then limit being able to do any, emergency maintenance or operations during significant storm events on the dam itself. It's the only access site to the main dam. And you can see in this picture, it does provide a bit better description of where the abutments, so the right south and north abutments, and then you have your sluiceways, and then the overflow weir. Access to the site is coming from the north down to the south, down to the property. During the field investigation, we did note there's seepage was noted along the downstream east side of the access road, as well as there was evidence of heaving along the roadway itself from the settlement of the dam. This dam also was constructed using outdated methods and materials used to originally construct the dam, and it may pose significant challenge if it was determined to be rehabbed. I'm going to pause again at this point until we go into the next
Lisa,
part.
we have a question.
Sure.
For many years, there has been an informal walkway running from the dam through the woods along the north side of the river down to the ponds below. Will this be maintained, and can it be improved, considering that it's probably on private property? So maybe I can take the first stop at this. Yes, so I'm actually, I know of the walkway. I walked it myself, and I don't see the dam construction disturbing the walkway. So I think yes, it would be maintained. With respect to it, if it can be improved, you will have to be looking at, the land ownership, obviously. I think it might be within the shoreline allowance, which is not Frontenac. But I think the access to the walkway and to the dam runs through a private property. So this is something that we would need to be looked into.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, we'll keep moving ahead. Oops. So the operation of the existing dam. So as I alluded to, the overflow structure is situated on, so the weir, sorry. So the overflow section of the weir is about 16.9 meters in length and an elevation of 261.06 meters. There's 2 gates that operate with timber stop logs. Generally, the dam is operated by removing the stop logs manually between an elevation of 258.2 meters to 261.22 meters. The graph to the side you'll see is sort of the target water levels for spring and summer, as well as winter operations. So the front half of the curve here, I'll start with, sorry, a bit out of order, but the target water levels for winter range run from 259.5 meters to 259.7, which is in this operating range here. And then during the summer months, you see the water elevation is elevated and it operates from a 260.98 meters to 261.28. The blue line is representing the base level operation of the lake dam or Kashwakamak Lake Dam itself. I might just stop and pause. Euro, do you want to, or Mustafa, is there anything in the next few slides that you want to interject just from a more of a water resources perspective before I move on? Please let me know.
Yeah, not at this point, Lisa, unless there are some questions. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Perfect. Okay, I'll just keep moving on then. So as alluded to, the hydraulic assessment was completed using HEC HMS, a numerical model, which was calibrated and validated in 23 for the Mississippi watershed. The model was provided to us by MVCA for this assignment. Through it, we looked at the HEC HMS model to help generate flow hydrographs, which included the flood frequency flow for rainfall events. The rainfall events were then used to generate inflow hydrographs for the 2-year to 1,000-year. In addition, these storm events also helped us determine the probable maximum flood inflow hydrograph, which were generated using the probable maximum precipitation. To aid in the analysis and ensure accurate modeling, all the hydrographs were generated for the entire Mississippi watershed. So these and generated, the hydrographs were also generated to take into consideration climate change. So once all these hydrographs were prepared, like I said, for the various storm events, they were used and moved forward to do our hydraulic assessment. And I just want to allude to this figure on the right. So this is the entire Mississippi watershed. And as you can see, all these little nodes, I keep pointing at the wrong screen, all these little nodes make up points within that HEC HMS model, where data is interjected into them from a rainfall, precipitation, hydrograph perspective, and is ran in the model to help generate these hydrographs to help us further do our hydraulic analysis as we move forward. So the hydraulic analysis, MVCA provided the existing models. So the HEC-RAS numerical model was prepared in 2022 and provided us for the watershed. Through this assignment, the HEC-RAS model was updated using the latest topo bathymetry data. So it was the 2022 LIDAR data and 2023 survey data, as well as the hydrographs, as I just alluded to, that were generated during the hydrological study mentioned on the previous slide. So all that data was uploaded into the HEC-RAS model to update it and make sure we get sound and important information out to help do the proper assessment. An incremental flood inundation study was then undertaken for the various storm series scenarios, which included without dam breach, but also with a dam breach. So it was analyzed in very critical times to try and determine the surface elevations and how the dam operated in existing conditions, as well as in the proposed alternative solutions, was assessed to see how it operates, should it be operated in normal conditions, or if a dam breach was to occur. As I previously alluded to, so the hazard potential classification assessment was completed for the 4 potential impact categories. Again, it takes into consider life safety, property losses, environmental losses, and cultural and built heritage losses. Each category was scored either in the low, moderate, high, or very high. Through the final evaluation of these categories and the incremental flood inundation study, the dam was determined to have a flood potential classification of moderate, is what was proposed for the structure and was applied. Sorry, I just saw something pop up. And then the inflow design flood was then updated using the HPC category assessment, as well as freeboard was then increased for the abutments and saddle dam to meet provincial requirements. So all that was taken into consideration in the model. As previously alluded, that the structure is quite old, so that a lot of the past mechanisms or designs or standards, that were probably put on this model way back when it was previously or constructed at the beginning in the 1980s, or sorry, 1860s, were not to the same standards that we are doing today. So that was taken into consideration through the HPC and the IDF to make sure that this dam can meet current standards, as well as taking into consider climate change. I'm going to pause here again and see that there's a question. Are there any comments related to hydro expectations in the near future? Euro or Mustafa, do you want to speak to that question?
What do the different, I guess, volumes
Oh, sorry,
mean?
I went to the climate change ones. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand this question. If it's maybe that's a couple slides back.
24, slide 24. I think Alan has a question. What to different?
I think it's maybe volumes.
24. Flows, maybe. Alan, did you?
Yeah. What do the different colors mean on that map?
Oh, colors.
Oh.
Sorry,
Oh, on this figure?
on the hydrological and hydraulic.
Oh, this is just the elevation, ground elevation.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, green means low, dark brown is high. This is just elevation, topographic elevation.
Thank you.
And then the climate change related changes expected.
Yeah.
I think all of us can see that, storms are definitely changing. In the region, we have definitely received some extreme weather events. So it has been taken into consideration as we move forward, but Euro, if you want to expand on that as well.
Sure. So we completed a climate change analysis as well as part of the hydrological analysis, and we looked at 2 future climate change scenarios based on different emissions. So we use the CP 4.5 and 9.5, which is like the middle of the road and the extreme worst case scenarios. And basically what we found out is that the future of flows or inflows to the lake might increase up to 20% for those climate change scenarios. So this is something that we will need to be considering in the design stage of the project. So as an extra factor of safety, should the flows increase, in the near future, the future design should be accommodating for that factor. So it's about roughly 20% increase.
Excellent.
And this is probably the more newer information since
Yes,
our last CLC meeting. Yeah,
thank you.
it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit of the same information that you guys received already to date, but yeah, we've just gone a bit more further into the analysis component.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or concerns or comments? No? Okay. We're almost towards the end. So proposed alternatives. So as I alluded to at the beginning of this assignment, or presentation as well, we identified 5 different alternatives, or 6 actually, because there's a 2A and 2B for consideration as we move forward. So the proposed alternatives that we selected or identified is alternative 1 is the do nothing scenario. The do nothing scenario. So no changes made within the study area, everything stays status quo. Existing dam stays within the study area. No changes are made. It just stays as is. Alternative 2A is decommission the existing dam and construct a passive control system. So the main dam would involve decommissioning of the dam and creating a passive water control system such as an overflow weir. The saddle dam itself would need to be repaired or replaced under this scenario to add flood control and drought control. Failure of the saddle dam would result in overtopping of the access road, which limits the access to the Kashwakamak Dam to perform any maintenance and operations during significant storm events. So option 2B is to decommission the existing dam and reinstate a natural water course. This alternative involves decommissioning and full removal of the existing dam and reinstating a natural water course and channel for the main portion of the dam. And then the saddle dam would remain in place to provide shoreline protection. However, the access road would no longer be maintained to the dam itself. Alternative 3 is the rehabilitation of the existing dam, which would consist of salvaging elements of the existing dam and preserving the structure in a stable state similar to existing condition. The saddle dam itself would need to be rehabilitated and consist of elements of existing or salvage existing elements of the existing dam and preserve its structure in a stable state similar to existing conditions as well. So this would be maintaining the 2 structures as is. Fourth alternative is replace the existing dam at the same location. So this is construction of a new dam in a similar alignment of the existing dam. For the purposes of this evaluation, the removal of the existing dam in its entirety was considered, with new footings and anchors being installed to the bedrock. Under this alternative, the saddle dam itself would need to be replaced with a similar alignment to the existing dam. However, the type of structure and the function is dependent on what type of dam is selected for replacement for the Kashwakamak Dam and how it functions from an elevation perspective. So it would have implications on what goes back in for the saddle dam. And then alternative 5 is the construction of a new dam. So the new dam would be constructed immediately downstream of the existing dam. This alternative would allow the existing dam, the Kashwakamak Dam, to remain in place during construction to aid in the management of flow. And again, for this alternative, the saddle dam would be replaced with a similar alignment, but the type and function or the type of structure that replaces for the saddle dam would once again be dependent on the main replacement of the main dam downstream of the existing one. So in order to properly assess the proposed alternatives that we just stated, we have to come up with some various criteria to evaluate them. There are 6 categories that we looked at. So the function and the technical. So the function and technical stability and engineering characteristics of the alternative solution, as well as the ability for it to adapt to climate change. So under that first one, so we're looking at the hydraulic function and flooding and drought, the geomorphology and sediment transportation at the structure, dam safety, its durability and service life. Will it give us a longer service life than maybe within what's currently out there? and is it able to adapt to climate change? And the last category in this one that we looked at is implementation and construction adaptability. So, what are the impacts during construction? The next category we looked at was the natural environment. So the effects on the natural environment and habitat and water quality. So as we go through, and as I alluded to through the previous investigations, that's why we documented the existing conditions. So we'll look at the impacts on fisheries and aquatic, on the terrestrial habitat, species at risk, and then again, the quality of the actual quality and quantity of the water course, if there's any impacts to it. And then we look at it also from a social environment perspective. So effects on residents and cottagers, business and social features such as recreation and tourism, as well as the potential impacts on properties are all looked through this assessment of this alternative as well, or this category, I should say, criteria, and the impacts that are felt from it for each alternative. We also look at from a cultural environment, so effects on archaeological, built cultural heritage features, and resources, as well as from First Nations perspective. So effects on the First Nation lands and harvesting rights was evaluated through this process. And then we look at it from an economic environment. So financial impacts from a capital cost and as well as an operational and maintenance cost. So all these categories we go through and looked at each of our alternatives that we just presented, so all of the 6, and evaluate each of the criteria for each one of these criterion that we've outlined under each of these categories to identify the impacts, whether they be positive or negative. I also just want to mention at this time that the watershed management plan addresses a variety of parameters which have been taken into consideration within these 6 categories. So it looks at it from a natural, socio, environment, cultural. They're all considered throughout this assessment.
Lisa, before we go, we have a new question.
Okay.
So the question is, if the dam is replaced, hopefully, will the water levels be maintained at the same level? So maybe I can answer this. Yes, so if the dam is replaced, water levels will be maintained. We will not be changing any water management plan that we do at the MBCA, and I should also add that it will be maintained and improved because, with the existing structure, we have ongoing issues with seepage. We might be losing some water in the summer through the base and the embankments, whereas the new structure will obviously, provide better service. So the levels again will be maintained and improved.
All right. So this is just a summary. There is a bigger assessment tables that we do go through, as I indicated, for each of those criteria. So it's broken down into each of those categories and each criteria is evaluated. And then we sum it up and do sort of an average take on determining what is the preferred the preferred solution. So we look at it from a ranking system of not preferred, least preferred to preferred. So we went through each of these alternatives. I do want to just state one thing, that alternative 2B, you'll notice, isn't within this table. It was not carried forward. So that is, just to circle back quickly, it's the alternative of decommissioning the existing dam and reinstating a natural water course. This alternative was not carried forward as it's unable to address the problem statement. It does not meet the needs of the watershed management plan and would have significant impacts on flood and drought control, as well as if significant impacts to natural and social environment and natural lands, as well as First Nations. So it really did not meet any of the objectives. It just was not a viable solution. So it was not carried forward into this higher level of evaluation. So we go through the evaluation, and like I said, we look at it and we say, not preferred, least preferred through the evaluation. So for the first category, do nothing. It's not recommended as it doesn't meet the problem and opportunity statement. there's a number of reasons. So it does have its, pros. It stays in its existing condition and remains in place. So there's no work being done, no cost implications. However, it's less resilience to larger storm events, including climate change. It continues to deteriorate and still has the risk of failure, and can't maintain the water management plan. It can for the interim, but in the long term, it will result in failure and not being able to maintain that integrity of the watershed management plan. Alternative 2A, so decommissioning the existing dam and constructing a passive control system. Again, this alternative does not address the problem operating statement. It does have relatively low to moderate cost implications and most likely doesn't require property, which is a good thing. But some of the cons associated is reduction in the limited ability to mitigate flow and drought and maintain the current WMP, so the watershed management plan. Its limited ability to fully adapt to climate change, as well as the higher function in the water levels, which will impact, higher fluctuation in water levels will impact the environment, as well as shoreline and recreation and tourism, as well as it has the impact the rice fields that we mentioned that are downstream. This alternative will also have temporary impacts during construction activities. Alternative 3 also was not carried forward as it doesn't address the problem opportunity statement. Again, it does maintain the current watershed management plan and helps maintain existing conditions upstream and downstream from an environmental social perspective. However, there's no significant changes to the water levels as the existing dam would be maintained. However, the negatives associated, there's no changes to the size of the spillway, which means resiliency to larger storm events will not be there, and being able to adapt to climate change, as well as if down the road, as the dam continues to deteriorate, there could be impacts to the natural and social environment, as well as during construction, there would be impacts to it, just sort of from the rehab perspective. And then alternative 4, replacing the existing dam at the same location. This is the recommended preferred alternative as it does address our problem statement. The pros associated with it, it does maintain the current watershed management plan. The dam would be designed to accommodate the larger storm events and adapt to climate change, which reduces the risk of downstream flooding. Downstream morphology will be maintained, so no impacts to the environment or the sensitive fish habitat that we mentioned earlier on the downstream side. No longer long-term impacts to First Nations, including the rice fields. One of the cons that associated with it, there will be temporary impacts during the construction of it. Just to get it built and put in place, there could be some intermediate changes in water levels. But as I alluded to before, that certain structures will be put in place to help with the dewatering aspect and ensuring that water levels are maintained. And then alternative 5, constructing a new dam downstream. This one does meet the watershed management plan, but does not meet our problem opportunity statement. So it was not recommended to be carried forward. From some other pros associated with this is designed to accommodate larger storm events and adapt to the climate change, and no direct impacts again to the lake levels. So from a recreational tourism perspective, it would be maintained. The cons associated with this one, though, and why it was not carried forward, it would require a larger structure, which would have more significant cost. Further downstream, the reach of the river gets wider, so therefore the structure would have to be larger to expand across it, which would then require us to attain additional property requirements or potential acquisitions. It could also have environmental impacts, as we alluded to, that there's that more sensitive fish habitat downstream, and it could have impacts with respect to the removal of it and for the placement of the new dam. And then unaltered lands, as I alluded to, would be impacted that are currently in their natural state, would be impacted during the construction of that dam from an access point, as well as constructing the new dam itself. And again, there would be temporary impacts due to construction activities for this alternative. So through this assessment, and at this time, our preferred recommended, as Sally alluded to at the beginning of this meeting, it is a recommended alternative at this point in time until we go through consultation and get comments back after this meeting, and do our further assessment and evaluation. But right at this time, we're saying or recommending that alternative forward be moved forward to replace the existing dam at the same location. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or comments. Euro, did you come off mute? For alternative for the preferred solution, however, would the project proceed? Hang on a sec.
Hello, maybe I can clarify for that. If we're looking at replacing the existing dam and the existing location as the preferred solution, and you're mentioning there will be temporary impacts, what does that mean? And if you remove the existing dam to build the new one in the same location, how would you do that while having to deal with the water that would still be trying to course through the waterway?
Maybe I can answer that question, Lisa. So we would have to be building a temporary coffer dam and dewater the construction area, right, to allow for the construction. And in terms of the temporary impacts, what is meant by it, that we would have to, obviously, to accommodate for the construction period, we would have to consider things like early drawdown of the lake, right? So typically the default drawdown happens around early October, right? So we might have to proceed with an earlier drawdown of the lake to basically allow for the construction timelines and proceed with the lowering of the water level earlier, early September. So that would be the temporary impact of that for that particular season on the lake.
Thank you for that answer. Also, water will continue to flow from water bodies upstream from Cache. So during this period, would there be mitigation that you would have to do upstream as well to drop water levels there to reduce the flow coming through? Because
we would be mitigating this at the site, at the construction site. So we would have to be designing some temporary bypass. But it's too early to. We don't have the details, obviously, at this stage of the project. Once we go into construction, to design stage, we would be looking at all these solutions. But I would see, that we would be addressing that on the construction side by bypassing the water and dewatering on site.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you very much for your answer.
And we have more hands up.
Yeah, it's Alan Dean again. Just following up on Jeff's question about the change in the water levels. I assume you know about how most of us have our boats taken in at the end of the season, and it's pretty typical for boats to go in early October. At least that's been the practice down my end of the lake. We get them out through the Fernley, get them either pulled out there or taken to another marina. So anything that happens to reduce the water level before the end of October or the late part of October is something we should know about. I mean, we can all make arrangements to get our boats in earlier, but the local marinas should also understand this is going to happen because they'll be suddenly facing a huge surge of boats coming in a month earlier than normal. So it's just a logistic thing. I'll be happy to provide the contacts with my marina, but I'm sure you have most of the ones around. There are only 2 or 3. But it's something to think about when the time comes. And the same applies to the timing of bringing the boats back in.
Yeah, no, that's a thank you, and that's a good point. And we would definitely have a logistics in place to make sure that everybody is informed of any earlier what changes in water levels. And also I should say that, we will also choose the timing for the construction that will have least impact. So, it's different is to do the construction in the early fall, where, as you said, the season is at its end, or to do the construction in late spring or early June, which would impact the entire season, right? So we will try to accommodate for that and really do it in the fall, so the impacts are minimal.
Thank you.
So this is Jerry Lichty. I'm looking at, first of all, alternative one, do nothing. Is there any immediate opportunity for this dam to fail? I mean, it looks can be deceiving, but you're getting seepage. It just doesn't seem that it's practical, so it's going to drive our timelines. Secondly, I'm looking at alternative 4 and alternative 5. And I appreciate there's a tremendous amount of assessments gone into this to come to the assessments that you've got of less preferred, not preferred, recommended, not recommended. But if you went with alternative 5, and I guess it would depend on the dollars, and it was just downstream of the existing dam, you could build that new dam in the summer. The old dam uses or acts as the cofferdam. You have no impact or almost no impact on the residents along the lake and the upper reaches or whatever flows into this lake. And you can take the old dam out in the winter when the water levels are at the lowest. And you know the source of the water coming through that dam, well, it'll be through the sluiceways, and you have a better opportunity to control it when you're downstream. And I appreciate there's all kinds of other things, but I'm just saying, maybe we shouldn't be so quick to just throw alternative 5 out.
Okay. Yeah, no, the alternative 5 is, definitely the benefit of the alternative 5 is that the existing dam, as you said, can be used as basically as a cover dam, right, and assist with the construction. However, the river channel widens up, like where the existing dam is placed, it's kind of like a natural place, to build a dam, and downstream of the dam, the channel really widens up, which would means that the cost of the project would pretty much doubled, if not more, like we would have to be building, a structure that would be twice the size. So that's one I think comment on the alternative 5, like the budgetary aspects, are just not there. And in terms of the alternative 1, so, obviously the dam is over 100-year-old, there's some serious deficiencies, and the reason, there's this risk, that the dam, if we do nothing, may eventually fail, right? So that's the reason, for us proceeding with this project. It's a top priority project in our 10-year capital plan, right? That we are addressing, and so that, we don't want to risk, losing the dam and losing the lake, in the future.
Alan, do you still have a question?
No.
Or no, sorry, okay.
I just
Yeah,
noticed.
no problem. And just with respect to the dam failure itself, and this dam is constantly being observed and monitored by MVCA. So yes, they are definitely looking for risks of failure as they move forward and getting this project up and going.
Yes, MVCA has a monthly monitoring program, so we are regularly visiting the structure, monitoring the seepage, looking at the dam. So that's correct.
Yeah. And just to go back to Gary, what you were saying about alternative 5, and to sort of expand a bit further on what Euro says, it's also looking at it from a socioeconomic as well as environmental impacts that will have on the land with moving it downstream. So as you alluded to, there was quite a bit of assessment going into it. Would it be, ideal to use it as a cofferdam, the existing dam, to construct? For sure, and it has been considered in our evaluation process. that like I alluded to as well at the beginning. So this project file report will be developed, and there will be time for the public to view that for 30 days. We will get into that in the next slide, but you'll see that full evaluation and thought process on determining the preferred alternative and why certain ones were ruled out for why they were.
And additionally, Lisa, it may require additional property and the more flooding downstream because elevation is going down, and to maintain these operational levels, and north and south is gonna flood more private property.
All right. Is there any more questions maybe on the evaluation itself before we move into the last slide? No. All right, so our next steps, as we indicated, we'll continue to do our consultation with governing agencies. We have another meeting scheduled with our CLCA committee, First Nations, stakeholders, residents and cottagers and public. Through this public meeting, you know, we really request that if anybody has any additional comments following this meeting, as Sally alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, the presentation and recording will be posted on the website. So if you want to go back and listen to anything specific and come up with some more questions or comments, we really encourage you to reach out to Euro and myself through the contact information at the bottom and submit your comments or questions or clarifications, and hopefully we can address them and take them into consideration as we move into the next bullet, which is updating our evaluation matrix and criteria and confirming the selection of the recommended technically preferred solution based on your consultation that we're doing this evening. So all comments and everything, like I said, will be taken into consideration and help us derive what the technically preferred alternative would be. So from that step, then we'll do our detailed analysis, so environmental impact and development of mitigation measures for the technically preferred solution, and prepare a conceptual design for that preferred alternative. So those are our next couple of steps. And as I alluded to, then we'll do another meeting with our CLC committee, and then the project plan will be issued for that for 30 days. So a notice of filing will be sent out to all interested parties, as well as the people on the contact list that we alluded to at the beginning of the meeting. And the file will be posted, or sorry, the project file will be posted on the website and allow for review period and comment during that time. Once that 30-day period, we will assess all the comments and make sure that the selected alternative still meets the requirements. And as I alluded to, addresses that problem opportunity statement that we stated at the beginning, and to help us to select the preferred alternative. So at the end, we will look at all comments, address all comments before we can issue that final notice saying that it is approved and can go to construction. Everything will have to be reviewed and assessed and updated after that 30-day review period. And then we will go to the notice of approval, and going to, I guess the next stage would be to design of the project before construction. So those are our steps. So again, I encourage everybody, and I thank everybody, encourage everybody to send us your comments or concerns or questions. We do still have some time. If there is any questions, we have another 30 minutes. So we can open the floor. But I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We greatly appreciate it, and helping us be successful in this assignment. Is there any questions? Alan?
Yeah, thanks. This is pretty similar to what these last next steps we discussed before. But do you have a better sense of timing on, say, first of all, when the next CLC committee meeting will be held?
We're probably was thinking what, mid-June, late June is what we're
Mid-June,
saying.
yeah.
So we want to ensure, because on the notice that was sent out for the PIC, there's a deadline, not a deadline, but a request that comments and any concerns be submitted to us before June 20th. So we want to make sure we have all the information in hand before meeting with the CLC, but it'll be in and around that point in time.
By June 20th. And then further ahead, do you have any sense of when the whole project will get underway, when you will actually start on the demolition and the lowering of the lakes and all of that? I had from our earlier meeting, I had a sense probably not before the fall of 2025. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, so maybe I can comment on that. So the next phase of the project will be preliminary and detailed design. So that will take place in 2025 to 26, and then, it's all the permitting aspects of the project. So I would see the construction moving us into construction 2026, the earliest.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So we shall remain vigilant and diligent until then. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments?
Excuse me,
You're-
I do have one, Lisa.
Go ahead.
Just curious how I can get a copy of this presentation, as I signed up just from an email from the Cache Lake Association. I'm actually the current president of the South Shore Lake Association with around 100 cottages. So would I just give you my email in the chat, or how would I get a copy of it?
So it will be posted on the MVCA website itself.
Thank you. Okay.
But as well, if you want to send me, either if you don't want to put your email in, your personal email in the chat, you could
Sure.
just email me directly.
Yeah, okay,
at
I've got that.
email
Thank you.
address,
Yeah,
and we'll make sure you get it.
okay. Thanks very much.
No problem.
And thanks for all the information.
Thank you. Was anything else you wanted to maybe wrap up for?
No, I think I would just again would like to thank everyone to joining us today and learn about this project. And yes, as Lisa said, please feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions you might have down the road, and we would be more than happy to answer it.
For sure. Alan, your hand is still up. Do you have another question? I think you're on mute. You're on mute too. I think. Alan, I think you're on mute if you're still talking. Sorry.
Done that.
Sorry. That
No
silly
problem.
mute button, eh?
Okay. We have extended an invitation to both you, Sally, and Uri to join our AGM meeting in July. There'll be there'll be a number of residents there, Lake residents, and the mayor, I believe, and it'd be a great opportunity to meet you guys and just get a person-to-person update, and you might be able to add some more information. So I hope you can join us. I'll follow up with you to see what your timing is like.
Yeah, and I will be happy to attend and join. Alan, sure.
That would be wonderful, and if Sally can make it, that would be too, because it's the face of the Conservation Authority, and it's very important for us on the lake, and it's interesting to meet you guys.
Yeah, I think you already sent that, Alan, and we've accepted. So looking forward to meeting you all.
That's wonderful news. Okay, thank you. And I'll send you more information.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's nothing further, again, I would just like to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and please submit your comments if you have any questions or concerns. It will be very helpful and grateful to help finalize this evaluation for this assignment and pick the preferred alternative. So thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a
Bye.
nice evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.